My grandfather's old key opened a door I never knew existed. A field of dead lavender, foreclosure notices ready to pounce, and a secret buried in a wooden chest. Beg us later. My stepmother laughed last year. This drought season. They stood at my gate, their voices trembling like the desert wind. I don't fight with fists. I fight with contracts, water bills, and a scent that makes the whole town turn its head. I am Calla Whitford. I was the last one standing at Ash Hollow Cemetery. The others had already retreated to their errand-conditioned cars, the sound of their engines turning over, eager to escape. Cut through the quiet. Brent's Lincoln was already turning onto the highway, a cloud of dust in its wake. Lorraine, my mother, and Savannah, my stepsister, were in the black Escalade, windows tinted, separating them from the heat and the grief. They were probably scrolling through playlists, anxious to put this inconvenient interruption to their lives behind them. I stood alone by the marker. It wasn't granite or marble. It was plain wood. The name Elias Thorne burned into the grain. It looked temporary. Felt like an insult. A final dismissal from the family that had leeched off him for years. The high desert wind moved the dry grass, making a sound like a sigh. It was the only thing moving. The sky was a flat white sheet of heat. I looked at the handful of dirt I'd thrown onto the casket. It was a dark patch on the pale, dry mound, and it was already starting to bake. My hand went into the pocket of my simple black dress. My fingers found the glass. It was a small, smooth vial, cool against my skin. I didn't need to look at it. I knew its weight. I'd carried it since I left my apartment this morning. I twisted the small cap. The scent hit me. It wasn't the sweet floral perfume Savannah bathed in. It was sharp, herbal, and clean. It smelled of sun-baked stone, resilient herbs, and the dry, tenacious spirit of the land itself. It was the smell of my grandfather. The scent was a key. It unlocked a memory, sudden and sharp. I was 9 years old, sitting on the wide porch of the farmhouse, my feet dangling, not quite touching the warped floorboards. The old porch swing he'd built was creaking. Thump creak, thump creak. He wasn't telling me stories about people or princesses. He was telling me about the wind. He said the wind from the north meant a hard frost was coming and the crops had to be covered. He said the wind from the east carried the smell of distant rain even when the sky was a perfect aching blue. You don't fight the wind, Hella, he'd said. His voice rough like burlap. You listen to it. You learn its name. Then maybe it works for you. I screwed the cap back on the vial. The memory snapped shut. The wind at Ash Hollow Cemetery said nothing. Just pushed against me. Indifferent. Conningcade's law office was worse than the cemetery. At least the cemetery was honest about death. This place on a dusty side street in town smelled of old paper, stale coffee, and the faint dusty odor of forgotten failures. The fluorescent lights hummed, constant, irritating buzz, casting a sick greenish tint on everyone. We sat in uncomfortable vinyl chairs that hadn't been updated since the 1980s. Lorraine sat perfectly straight, her grief as managed and curated as her blonde hair. Brent Mallory, her husband, my stepfather, tapped his polished Italian shoe on the industrial carpet. He checked his watch. Savannah was hidden behind the bright screen of her phone, the blue light illuminating her bored, flawless face. Lawyer Consincade cleared his throat. He was a man made of beige. Beige suits. Beige tie. Beige tired personality. He adjusted his glasses and began to read the will in a monotone that matched the humming lights. It was mostly simple. A few old savings bonds, a 20-year-old pickup truck with over 200,000 M. Then he got to the real part regarding the property known as Blue Mesa Lavender. My spine stiffened. I felt the glass vial in my pocket. A solid weight. The farm. Its structures. And all associated debts shall be passed to Lorraine Mollery, Brent Mollery, Savannah Mollery, and Calla Whitford as equal co-owners. Brent let out a long theatrical sigh. It was a sound of profound impatience. A performance for Kincaid. A debt trap, he said. Not to the lawyer, but to the room. He waved a dismissive hand as if swatting a fly. In deep debt. The place is worthless. Leverage to the hilt. Just sell the land to the county for back taxes. Be done with it quickly. Lorraine nodded. Tight, controlled movement. She reached up and adjusted her single strand of pearls. The pearls she wore everywhere. The pearls Brent had given her the day they moved into his house. The day I was relegated to the guest room. They were her uniform. They were her allegiance. Brent is right, she said. Her voice smooth and reasonable. It's a practical matter. We must be practical. She didn't look at me. She hadn't made eye contact with me since the service began beside her. Savannah finally looked up from her phone. A small, cruel smile played on her lips. She held the phone up slightly as if to show me a picture she'd just taken. I just checked the Zillow estimate, she whispered. Her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. The land value is negative. We basically inherited a hole, she smirked. A quick, sharp expression of triumph. She enjoyed this. She enjoyed the confirmation that my side of the family, my bloodline, was officially financially worthless. Kincaid kept reading, his voice droning on, ignoring them. In the event that any single heir wishes to assume full ownership, said heir must buy out the remaining shares of the other listed parties at a price to be determined by the attached addendum. I'll buy it. My voice was quiet. It wasn't loud, but it cut through the humming of the lights and the sound of Brent's tapping shoe. Stopped everything. Brent's shoe froze mid-tap. Lorraine's hand clamped down on her pearls. Savannah's smirk vanished, replaced by a flat, confused stare. Even Kincaid paused, looking up from the paper. His eyes finding mine over the rim of his glasses. The room didn't just get quiet. It froze. The air turned to glass. They were looking at me. Really looking at me. For the first time in years. They weren't seeing a daughter or a stepsister. They were seeing an obstacle. An absurdity. Brent was the first to recover. He chuckled. It was a dry, insulting sound. Like stones rattling in an empty can. You'll what? He scoffed. With what? Gala. Your tip jar. I didn't answer him. I reached into the canvas bag I'd carried to work every day for 6 years. I pulled out a single folded piece of paper. It was a bank statement from the Mesa Valley Credit Union. I unfolded it carefully, the creases sharp, and placed it on the desk in front of Kincaid. I didn't look at the number. I didn't need to. I knew the number by heart. I had watched it grow. Dollar by agonizing dollar for 2,190 days. 6 years at Vector Line Logistics. 6 years in a gray cubicle under those same humming fluorescent lights. My job was data entry, administrative support. The stable job. Lorraine called. A good, quiet place for someone like you. The job Brent and Savannah referred to as that sad little desk job. They saw it as proof of my mediocrity, my lack of ambition. They never saw it as a tool. They never saw the second hidden budget I ran on a locked spreadsheet on my home computer. They never saw the overtime I volunteered for the holidays I worked. The cramped cheap apartment I kept on the edge of town. The car I learned to repair myself from YouTube videos. They saw a mouse. They never saw the trap I was building. Kincaid picked up the statement. His beige eyebrows rose just slightly. He looked at me. Then at the others. Brent leaned over, squinting at the paper. His laughter grew louder, sharp and mocking. Is that supposed to be impressive? That's a down payment on a used car. Sweetheart. That's not a farm. He leaned back in his chair. crossing his arms. He was in control again. He was the adult in the room, the businessman. "Tell you what," he said, his voice dripping with a false, pitying generosity. "Beg us. Beg us later. When you've had time to think about it. Nunto. We might still let you walk away clean. Then look on Kip. Beg us." He always loved using that word. A little phrase he'd picked up from Lorraine. A way to mock her heritage and my dependence in one breath. I turned my head. I looked at my mother. Lorraine was studying her cuticles as if they held the most fascinating secret in the world. She offered nothing. No defense. No support. Just pearls and silence. Savannah was openly grinning now. Her phone held low, angled to film my reaction. I could see the red record dot reflected in her sunglasses. I turned back to Concade. I ignored the others completely. "I have a cashier's check for the down payment," I said. My voice flat. I pulled it from the same envelope. $24,000. I slid it across the desk. It covered the number on the bank statement. The will provides for an installment plan. I've read the addendum. Mr. Concade attached. I agree to the terms. 36 months. The interest rate is clearly stated. I will pay the remaining balance in installments as specified. This wasn't a plea. It wasn't a request. It was a transaction. Concade looked at the check. He looked at the will. He looked at Brent. "The terms are legal," Concade said, his voice still monotone, but now with a flicker of something new. "If Ms. Whitford provides the down payment and the other heirs agree to the terms of the buyout, the transfer is binding." Brent and Lorraine exchanged a look. I could see the calculation in their eyes. Swift and greedy. $24,000 cash right now. They looked at Savannah. She shrugged. Her eyes wide with the prospect of an unexpected payday. They saw a fool. They saw me in my cheap black dress with my cubicle job trying to save a farm that was drowning in debt. They thought it was impossible. They thought I would default in 6 months. One season. One failed harvest. One broken water pump. They thought I would be crushed by the weight of it. And when I failed, they would have my $24,000. And Concade, or the bank, would hand the foreclosed property right back to them. They would get paid twice. It was for them a perfect no-risk investment. "Fine," Brent said, grabbing the pen from Concade's desk holder. "Let her play farmer. It's her funeral." He signed the agreement with a flourish. "Sign the paper." Lorraine. Lorraine signed her signature a graceful empty loop. Savannah signed hers last, dotting the I in her name with a small jaunty circle. They signed because they thought I would fail. They signed because they were arrogant. They signed because they were greedy. They signed. I took the pen from Savannah. I signed last. My signature was just my name. Gala Whitford. Clear. Plain. No loops. The door to Concade's office clicked shut behind me. The sound was final. Like a lock engaging. I stood in the hallway for a second, my hands trembling. Just slightly. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a cold, sharp clarity in its place. I walked out of the building into the blinding white parking lot. The air had changed. The wind had picked up and it was cooler now. It carried the smell of the high desert petrol, the electric ozone scent of rain hitting dry, thirsty ground, and mixed with it, faint but insistent, was another smell. The herbal dusty ghost of lavender. The smell from the vial. The smell of my grandfather. It wasn't a comfort. It was a warning. It was a signal. I pulled out my phone. My fingers were stiff. I opened the Notes app. I started a new note. The cursor blinked on the white screen. I typed 3 lines. No shin. No noni. Just lamb. I hit save. I put the phone in my pocket next to the vial of oil. I got in my old car. The one I'd repaired myself and drove toward Blue Mesa. Toward the Rackno. Toward the hole. Toward my farm. The county asphalt ended 5 miles back. My turnoff was just a gap in the barbed wire. A suggestion of a road. The sign Blue Mesa was so faded by the sun. It was just a gray ghost of a board. I turned the wheel. The car's tires immediately bit into the dry, packed earth. A crunching sound that vibrated up through the steering column and into my hands. This was it. The road into my inheritance. The road was a living thing. A scar across the land. It wasn't gravel. It was just earth baked hard. Crack deep. A million fissures spreading out like a spider web. Like the skin of a desert animal that had died of thirst. My old sedan built for city streets bucked and complained. The suspension groaning with every rut. Dust kicked up behind me. A fine pale plume that hung in the still hot air. The only thing I'd moved for miles. I saw the pump house first. It sat low and sad by the road. Its wooden slats gray and warped. The electric meter attached to the side was the only new thing. A small screen trader. But its screen was dark. The engine ticking in the silence. The silence was absolute. No birds. No insects. Just the low, constant hum of the wind passing over the dry fields. I got out. The heat hit me like a physical thing. A drywall I had to push through. I walked to the pump. It was a heavy cast iron beast. Painted a dull green that was flaking off, revealing patches of bright orange rust. I put my hand on the casing. It was cold. It hadn't run in a long time. The main wellhead was bolted shut. Beside it, driven deep into the ground, was a metal post. Chained and padlocked to it, was the main water valve for the Mesa Verde Water District.
A ciklominotettag.
Its edges already peeling, was attached to the chain. The red block letters were impossible to misinterpret. Disconnected. Count delinquent. Brent's words echoed in the silence. Rock. No. I followed the dry, cracked pipes up the slight incline toward the main structure. It wasn't a barn. Not really. It was a long, low-slung shed. Its sides and roof made of corrugated tin. The sun reflecting off it was blinding. The tin was strewn with rust, bleeding orange tears down to the foundation. This was the distillery. This was the heart. The large double doors were shut, held closed by a simple wooden beam dropped into 2 brackets. I lifted the beam. It was heavy, the wood dry and splintery in my hands. I slid one of the heavy doors back. The sound was terrible. A high metallic shriek. A scream of rust on rust that scraped my nerves raw. The door moved an inch. I pushed harder, bracing my shoulder against the hot metal, and it finally gave way, sliding open with a rattling groan. I stepped inside. The air was thick, still, and surprisingly cool. It smelled of dust. Not house dust, but something else. It was a fine silvery powder that coated everything. And it smelled of dry herbs, of metal, of ozone, and faintly, so faintly, of old lavender. Light cut through the gloom from the gaps in the tin roof, illuminating millions of dust motes dancing in perfect slow-motion silence. And there it was. The distillery. It wasn't a modern stainless steel setup. It was old. It was bronze and copper gleaming a dull rich brown under the layer of silver dust. 2 large copperic stills, a type my grandfather had called or ancient, stood like silent sleeping giants. A maze of copper pipes and condenser coils. A design I'd later learn was classically Provence connected them, looking more like a sculpture than a piece of farm equipment. Everything was coated in that same fine pale dust. To the side against the wall was a simple, brutal workspace. A long, heavy wooden workbench. Its surface scarred with decades of cuts, burn, and stains. And on it, sitting perfectly square in the middle, as if he had just set it down, was a book. It wasn't a new book. It was a ledger bound in dark brown leather, the cover worn smooth at the corners. There was no title. I ran my fingers over the cover. The leather was supple under the dust. I opened it. The first page wasn't a date. It was a title written in a strong, deliberate hand. The ink was a deep, startling purple. The Mesa Wind Calendar. I turned the page. It was half journal, half almanac. He had recorded everything. March 23rd. North wind. Frost risk. Cover the Kir Royale seedlings. June 14th. East wind smells of rain. Hold off irrigation one more day. Week 23. The south wind arrives hot and fast. Cut the silver dawn now before the oil burns off. It wasn't just farming. He was listening. He had been listening to the wind just as he told me. My fingers traced the purple ink, feeling the slight indentation he'd left in the thick, creamy paper. Beside the notebook was a stack of mail. The more recent mail. The mail that had arrived after he'd gone to the hospital. Picked it up. The top envelope was from the Mesa Verde Water District. It wasn't a bill. It was a notice. I ripped it open. 7 months past due. The original amount was high. The late fees. Penalties. The reconnection charges. They were stacked on top line by line, each one a separate stinging slap. They were brutal. They were, as I'd thought, like cactus spines designed to punish, to make you bleed for reaching. I found the rest. The overdue property taxes, the loan on the tractor, the notices from suppliers. Brent wasn't wrong. It was a mountain of debt. It was designed to make someone give up. I turned my attention back to the equipment. Running a hand over the cold copper. I needed to know exactly what I had. I began an inventory. 2 800L copper stills. 1 Provenance-style condenser unit seemingly intact. A floral water separator. A set of filtration tanks. The lines were copper. Not plastic. It was built to last. It was just asleep. In the corner, there was an old gray metal cabinet. A small cheap padlock hung from the latch, but it wasn't locked. It was just resting there. I lifted it off. The hinges creaked. A low, quiet complaint. I pulled the door open. The smell of old paper and dried ink washed over me. Inside there were stacks of cardboard boxes. I pulled one down. It was full of labels. Not modern glossy labels, but thick cream-colored paper labels beautifully printed in the same purple as his ink. Blue Mesa Botanica, they read. And beneath that, Windrun Distillation. In another box, I found them small amber glass bottles, 100,000, with cork stoppers. And in the very back, wrapped in an oily cloth, was a heavy brass stamp. I pressed it against my dusty palm. When I pulled it away, a faint impression was left on my skin. A simple circle with the words Blue Mesa and the year 1959. This wasn't just a farm. It was a brand. It was a history. And they had tried to sell it for scrap. My hand was shaking. I pulled out my phone. The signal was 1 bar. Weak and struggling. I called the bank first. The one that held the note on the property itself. I gave them my name. The account number. I told them I was the new owner. The voice on the other end was bright, corporate, and completely indifferent. Congratulations on your acquisition. Whitford. We will need a formal business plan and cash flow projections for the next 12 quarters if you wish to be considered for a loan extension. Our agricultural business department will be happy to email you the packet. A business plan. Cash flow projections. They wanted numbers I didn't have. They wanted promises about a future I couldn't see. I hung up. The silence of the shed rushed back in. The sun started to dip and the light inside the shed turned from silver to a deep burnt orange. The metal walls began to cool, pinging and groaning as they contracted. It was getting cold. The desert night came on fast. I had a choice. I could get in my car, drive back to my empty apartment, and sleep in my comfortable bed. Or I could stay. I had a blanket and a pillow in my trunk, part of an old emergency kit. I brought them inside. I didn't bother with the farmhouse. It was full of ghosts I wasn't ready to face. I would stay here with the work. I swept a patch of the concrete floor clean with an old broom. I laid the blanket down. I sat my back against the cold metal wall. I ate a protein bar from my bag and drank the last of my warm water. And then I lay down using my jacket as a pillow. The first night was hard. The concrete floor was unforgiving, sucking the warmth from my body. I shivered even with the blanket. But it was the sounds that kept me awake. The wind didn't whistle. It didn't howl. It moved through the gaps in the tin roof with a low, inconsistent sigh. A dry rasping sound. It sounded like my grandfather's cough. That quiet, persistent rasp he'd had in his last few months. It was a lonely sound. The sound of a place holding its breath. I lay there in the dark, staring up at a blackness I couldn't see. And I listened. When the first thin gray light of dawn finally found the gaps in the roof, I sat up. I was stiff. I was cold. But I was clear. I picked up my phone. The single bar of service was back. I didn't call the bank. I called the Mesa Verde Water District. I navigated the automated menu until I got a real person. I need to schedule a meeting with the water board, I said. My voice was from the dust. Regarding account 451B, Blue Mesa Farm. The woman on the other end was skeptical. Mom, that account is scheduled for lien auction. I am the new owner, I said. I am not calling to make promises. I am calling to present data on a new irrigation plan. There was a pause. The next public hearing is in 2 days, she said. Her voice flat. 9:00 a.m. I'll be there, I said. And hung up. I stood up, my joints cracking. I walked over to the workbench. I picked up the leather notebook. I flipped through the pages, past the wind charts, past the harvest notes, until I found a page near the back. It was just a single sentence written in that same strong purple ink. A note to himself. Or maybe to me. Lavender doesn't need anyone's pity. It just needs the right season and the right wind. I tore the page out. The sound of the paper ripping was loud in the morning quiet. I went to the old metal cabinet and found a roll of yellowed masking tape. I walked to the wall by the door. The main wall I would see every time I entered and every time I left. I stuck the page to the corrugated tin right at my eye level. The tape barely held to the dusty metal. Pressed it down hard, running my thumb over the words. I stood back. The piece of paper looked small and fragile against the vast rusty wall. "Okay," I said. My voice quiet in the huge empty space. "Show me the wind. Ridge Rail Supply isn't a hardware store. It's not a garden center. It doesn't sell decorative bird baths or scented candles. It smells of diesel fuel, oiled metal, and the earthy sharp tang of 30-pound bags of livestock feed stacked in towers. The floors are bare concrete, stained with hydraulic fluid. The men who shop here don't browse. They come in with a broken part in their hand, get what they need, and leave." I stood at the counter for a full minute before the man behind it even looked up. He was writing in a ledger with a pencil, the numbers precise. "Help you?" he asked, not lifting his head. "I'm looking for someone," I said. He kept writing. "This ain't the sheriff's office. Someone who used to work for Elias Thorne at the lavender farm." The pencil stopped. He looked up. His eyes were pale blue, skeptical. He looked me over from my dusty boots to my City Logic jacket. "Elias is gone." It was a statement, not a question. I know the farm is mine now. He let out a short, dry huff. It wasn't a laugh. It was a judgment. His family sold him out. Heard they couldn't wait for the body to get cold. I'm the family that bought it. This gave him pause. He put the pencil down. I need someone who knows the stills. Someone who knows the plants. He leaned back, folding his arms. The bank take the place yet? Not yet. He chewed on that. Most of Elias's hands are gone. Moved on. There's one. But he's not for hire. Not really. He's particular. Who? Efrain Cortez. He's the only one who knew the copper. Elias sent him to France years ago. Province to learn the old way. He's not easy. He gave me directions. Not a street address, but a series of landmarks. Past the dry creek. Look for the blue mailbox with no name on it. He'll be in the back shed. I found the mailbox. It was exactly as described. A lone blue box on a weathered post. Paint peeling. Surrounded by miles of dry brown scrub. The house behind it was small. Adobe. And looked as if it had been carved from the earth itself. It was neat. The dirty yard was swept clean. I followed a path to the back shed. The sound of metal on stone. A rhythmic shing grew louder. I found him. He was an older man. His skin the color and texture of cured leather. He was standing at a grinding wheel, sharpening the blade of a heavy-duty brush cutter. Sparks flew, illuminating a face full of deep lines. He didn't stop when I approached. He didn't look at me. Mr. Cortez. The grinding stopped. The wheel spun down, whining. He turned slowly and wiped his hands on an oiled rag. His eyes were dark and sharp. He looked at my car, parked by the anonymous mailbox. He looked at my clothes. Then his eyes settled on my hands, which I'd shoved into my pockets. Take them out, he said. His voice was low, growly. I took my hands out of my pockets. He stepped closer. Close enough for me to smell the metallic dust on his shirt. He didn't ask. He just took my right hand, his grip surprisingly strong, and turned it over. His calloused thumb ran over my palm. He saw the new blisters from the shed door. He saw the grease under my nails from the water pump. And he saw beneath that the soft pale skin of my palms, the faint repetitive stress callus at the base of my index finger from a keyboard. He dropped my hand. Info. He said. The word's sharp. City people. You don't know how to get your hands dirty. Not really. This is just a game for you. He turned back to the grinding wheel. He was dismissing me. The water is off. I said to his back. The bank wants a business plan. The fields are dead. Not my problem, he said. The grinding started again. Shing. I had a thermos in my bag. I'd made it in the shed that morning. Boiling water on a tiny camping stove. I took it out. I also took out 2 tin mugs. I poured. The coffee was black and bitter. It steamed in the cool morning air. I put 1 mug on the workbench beside him near his elbow. My grandfather drank his coffee black. I said. The grinding slowed. He looked at the mug. He didn't take it. I pulled the leather-bound book from my bag, the Mesa Wind Calendar. I placed it on the bench next to the coffee. The grinding stopped completely. He looked at the book. He looked at me. He looked back at the book. He picked up the rag, meticulously wiped the grease and metal filings from his hands, and then with a strange reverence he picked it up. He opened it. His fingers thick and stained, traced the purple ink. He turned a few pages. His expression unreadable. He wasn't just reading. He was remembering. He stopped on a page, his finger tapping one entry. Twan 23. He read aloud, his voice soft. Geonam week 23 the south wind. The man who wrote this, he said, his eyes lifting to meet mine. He knew how to listen to the wind. He was my friend and his family. His eyes hardened. His family let him die and left his work to rot. His family sold it. I said, my voice as cold as his. I bought it. That book is the only thing I have that makes any sense. I can't read the wind. You can. I need you to teach me. He looked at me for a long time. The silence stretched out, filled only by the whisper of the high desert wind passing his shed. I don't work for wages, he said finally. I'm not offering wages. I'm offering a partnership. A bad one. $18 an hour. A 6-month contract. I can't offer benefits. I can't offer insurance. I can't promise anything except that the check will clear every Friday. It's not a gift. It's not a favor. It's just a fair number. He laughed. A dry sound like his $18 for what I know. That's an insult. It's all I have. I said. It's not an insult. It's just the math. He stared at me. He was weighing me. He was deciding if I was a fool or just desperate. He saw the truth. I was both. He picked up the tin mug of coffee. He took a long, slow drink. He closed the book and handed it back to me. Be at the farm at sunrise tomorrow, he said. And don't be late. He paused, looking at my hands again. No. Lambu, he said, tapping the book I was holding. Today, if you're willing to follow the letters, I'll teach you the wind. He was there before me. The sun was just a sliver of burning orange on the horizon, and his old truck was already parked by the shed. He was standing in the middle of the first field, his arms crossed, looking at the rows of dead gray skeletons. This, he said. Not bothering with good morning is a graveyard. You didn't just buy a farm. You bought a cemetery. He started walking. I followed this row. He kicked at the base of a brittle, dry plant. Snapped. The sound sharp in the quiet. Silver dawn. Stubborn. She holds the most oil, but she'll fight you. She needs the heat. He moved to the next. Blue lynx. This one is tough. Good for drying for bundles. She can handle a late frost. This is your workhorse. He stopped at a row that was almost completely gone. Just brittle sticks.
Kia royale.
This was his favorite. His voice softened. Just a fraction. She's difficult. Finicky. She'll only bloom if the wind is right. She's a queen. And right now, she's dead. He was testing me. He was showing me the scale of the failure. We walked for an hour. He didn't just show me the plants. He showed me the irrigation lines clogged with calcium. He showed me the erosion. He showed me where the gophers had chewed through the main lines. You have a data plan? He asked. Yes, I said, pulling out my phone. I had a farming app open, one I downloaded, ready to take notes. He scoffed. Good. Turn it off. He bent down. He scooped up a handful of the dry, pale earth from the base of a silver dawn. What does your app say about this? I said. Nothing. This, he said, is your God. Not the bank. Not your phone. The soil. He crushed it. It was dust. It filtered through his fingers, leaving his palm pale. It's dead. It has no life. No water. No heart. He moved to a different spot under the shade of the shed where a broken pipe had leaked months ago. The ground was darker. He grabbed a handful. He squeezed it. When he opened his hand, the soil held its shape. A perfect dark clump. This is too wet. This is rot. This is disease. You're drowning it. He walked to a third spot. He dug his fingers in deep. He pulled up a handful, squeezed, and then opened his hand. The soil broke into 3 distinct crumbly pieces. "This," he said, holding it out to me. "This is what you want. It holds the water. But it breathes. Your app can't tell you that. Your hands can." He dropped the soil. "Now you do it for every row. For the rest of the morning." I walked. I knelt. I dug my hands into the earth, testing, feeling, learning the difference between dust and 3 pieces. My fingernails were broken. My hands caked in dry gray dirt. In the afternoon, we moved to the shed, to the distillery. His silence here was different. It was angry. He ran his hand over the dusty copper still. "He left this clean," he whispered. I taught him how to clean it. He would never. He looked at the dust, the neglect. "This is a sin." He was merciless. He didn't just point out the problems. He made them mine. The main water pump. It seized. He said, "I'll call a mechanic." I said, "No." He tossed a heavy wrench onto the concrete floor. It landed with a loud metallic clang. "You will take it apart piece by piece. You will clean every gasket. You will soak every bolt in solvent. You will find the seized bearing. And then you will put it back together. I will watch." I stared at the wrench. It was huge. "I don't know how you have that phone." "Learn," he said. "The conchu. Remember." So, I did. I spent the next 3 days on my hands and knees on the oily concrete floor. I learned what a gasket puller was. I learned the smell of industrial solvent, a smell that burned my nose and made my eyes water. I learned the precise, brutal strength it took to crack a bolt that hadn't been moved in 5 years. My knuckles bled. I broke 2 wrenches. I cracked the screen of my phone when I dropped it. I took the entire pump apart, laying each greasy, filthy piece out on a tarp. Ephraim sat on a stool, drinking his black coffee, watching. He didn't help. He just corrected. "Wrong. You'll strip the thread. Turn it counterclockwise. Counterclockwise. That's the intake valve. Don't score the metal. The gasket is rotten. You'll need to make a new one. The sheet stock is in the cabinet. Use the brass shears." I did it all. I made the notes. Fix pump. Descalats. Replace all file seals. I didn't delegate. I was the one with my arms shoved deep into the boiler, scrubbing the calcium deposits with a wire brush and vinegar until my shoulders screamed in protest. I was the one who took the dirtiest jobs. On the evening of the 3rd day, it was done. The pump was reassembled. Every bolt was tightened. The new hand-cut gasket was in place. "Turn it on," he said. We had no water from the district, but there was an old cistern half full of stagnant rainwater. I primed the pump, hooked up the intake, and flipped the breaker. There was a groan, shudder, a high-pitched squeal, and then a low, steady, beautiful hum. I sat down on the workbench, my entire body shaking with exhaustion. I was covered head to toe in a thick film of grease, rust, and solvent. The sun was setting, painting the shed's interior in stripes of orange and purple. Ephraim nodded. Once it was the only praise I would get. It was enough. I lifted my hand to push my hair out of my face. The smell that rose from my skin was overwhelming. It was the smell of old machines, of WD-40, of metal dust and acidic vinegar. But as I sat there, a different, sharper scent cut through it all. It was coming from my shirt, from where I had brushed against the bundles of dead, dry lavender weed cleared from the shed. It was herbal, sharp, and clean. It was the smell of the farm, the smell of the work. The lavender was stronger than the machine. My phone resting on the bench lit up the dimming shed. The screen with its new spiderweb crack showed a text message. It was from Brent. "One line chew broke yet?" I looked at the message. My thumb caked with grease and dirt hovered over the screen. I could have typed anything. I could have typed no. I could have typed go to hell. I just pressed the button on the side. The screen went black. I didn't answer. The meeting room for the Mesa Verde Water District was cold. The air conditioning was set to an aggressive chill, a stark contrast to the blazing heat outside. And it smelled of industrial strength cleaner and weak, old coffee. It was designed to make you uncomfortable, to make you want to finish your business and leave. The walls were a pale government-issue beige, the same color as Kincaid's suit. At the front of the room, 5 board members sat behind a long raised dais. They looked tired. They looked skeptical. They had seen everyone's personal tragedy. I was the last item on the 9 a.m. agenda. Account 451B. Blue Mesa. Calla Whitford. I walked to the lectern. I did not bring a plea. I did not bring a family history. I brought a laptop and a single-page laminated summary which I had printed at the town library. I handed a copy to each board member. "Good morning," I said. My voice steady, echoing slightly in the microphone. I plugged my laptop into the projector. The screen lit up on the wall behind me. It wasn't a picture of a farm. It was a spreadsheet. "I am Calla Whitford, the new registered owner of 451B. I am not here to dispute the outstanding balance of $1,420.50. I am here to present a payment plan and a water conservation proposal that will make Blue Mesa a viable low-consumption partner for the district." I clicked to the first slide. It was a line-item cash flow projection for the next 6 months. It was based on zero revenue for the first 2 months and modest conservative estimates for the following 4. As you can see, I am not projecting a profit. I am projecting solvency. My operating costs are minimal because I am the sole proprietor and operator. I clicked again. A technical diagram appeared. This is the current irrigation system. It's a 1970s-era flood irrigation model with an estimated water loss ratio of 55% due to evaporation and soil saturation failure. I pointed to the red highlighted numbers. My grandfather was paying for water that was turning to vapor before it ever hit a route. I clicked again. A new, more complex diagram appeared, full of grids and thin blue lines. This is my proposal. A full conversion to a pressure-compensated drip irrigation system, targeting the root ball of each individual plant. I have already sourced the primary components from agricultural surplus. The system will be fed from the main pump which I have personally rebuilt. I pointed to the new number. It was in green. The projected water savings based on soil type and plant needs is a minimum of 32%. I am asking to pay for less water by using less water. I advanced to the final slide. The proposal. I am prepared to pay $5,000 of the outstanding balance today for my personal capital. I propose paying the remaining $98, $820.50 and 12 equal interest-bearing monthly installments in addition to my new projected use water bills. I looked up from the lectern meeting the eyes of the board chair, a severe-looking woman named Mrs. Agnew. "I have one more provision," I said. "I am requesting at my own expense the installation of a district-approved smart meter. I want you to have real-time data on my consumption. I want my accountability to be absolute. In return for this plan, I am asking for reconnection." Silence. The board members looked at each other. And my one-page summary. A man at the end of the table, Mr. Davies, who ran the largest cattle ranch in the county, leaned into his microphone. "That's a real pretty spreadsheet. Whitford. I've seen a lot of pretty spreadsheets. They tend to fall apart when the first frost hits or the market turns." He tapped my summary. "You're projecting revenue. Revenue from what? That place is a stick field. I drive by it. It's dead." This was the moment. They weren't testing my math. They were testing my reality. My revenue is based on 3 specific non-speculative channels, I said. My voice flat, betraying no emotion. Channel 1 high-grade essential oil. The dead plants. The Kir Royale and Silver Dawn varieties are drought-hardened. Efrain Cortez, the original distiller for this farm, is working with me. Our assessment is that the oil from these stress plants will be highly concentrated. It will be a low-yield, high-cost product for a niche market. I saw a flicker of recognition in Agnew's eyes when I said Efrain's name. Channel 2 dried botanical bundles. The Blue Lynx variety is not dead. It is dormant. It's ideal for the dried floral market, which has zero water costs post-harvest. I have already secured a preliminary verbal agreement for a monthly booth at the Canyon Row Farmers Market pending operation. Channel 3 Agoism. The distillery itself is a 1950s-era province-style copper works. It's a piece of local history. I will be offering paid tours and distillation workshops. The market for authentic experiences is the fastest-growing tourism sector in this county. I didn't smile. I didn't hedge. I just stated the facts. Mr. Davies leaned back. He looked at Mrs. Agnew. She steepled her fingers. Whitford. Your plan is thorough. More thorough than we are used to. However, the district has been burned by this specific property before. We cannot, in good conscience, extend a 12-month line of credit on a delinquent account. My stomach tightened. However, she continued, the board is impressed by your capital investment in the smart meter and your conservation plan. It shows good faith. She slid a piece of paper across the D's. The clerk picked it up and handed it to me. It was a new contract. We will accept your $5,000 payment. We will accept the installment plan. We will reconnect your water today contingent on your installation of the meter. I read the terms. My eyes scanned, looking for the catch. I found it. This is a zero-tolerance probation, Agnew said as if reading my mind. See. Paragraph 4. Subsection B. If any payment, new bill or installment is late by more than 10 business days, service will be immediately and permanently terminated. The full balance will be due and the property will be liened. No appeals. No hearings. Do you understand? 10 days. It was a razor. One bad month. One slow check. One broken pump. And I was finished. I was signing my own death warrant. Brent's laugh echoed in my head. Hunter. I uncapped my pen. I signed my name. I understand completely. I handed the signed contract and the cashier's check to the clerk. Thank you for your time. I walked out of the cold room back into the blistering sun. I hadn't won. I had just bought more time at a higher price. When I got back to the farm, Efrain was waiting by the main pipe, a shovel in his hand. How did it go with the vultures? He asked. The water is coming, I said. But the terms are bad. We have a 10-day leash. 10 days. 10 years. Doesn't matter. He grunted. The work is the same. He looked at the padlocked valve. They'll be here this afternoon to put in the new meter. I have to pay for it, I said. Good, he said. Never take anything for free. He spat on his hands and grabbed the shovel. Before they come. We walked the line from the road to the pump house. I don't trust their pipes. It was a half-mile walk. The pipe was buried 3 foot down, following the cracked dirt road. Efrain didn't just walk. He stopped every few yards. He looked. He listened. What are you looking for? I asked. A patch of green, he said. In the middle of all this brown. We were 100 yards from the county road, far from my property line. When he stopped, he pointed with the shovel. There, I saw nothing. Just a patch of dried, thorny weeds. Look under the weeds, he said. I knelt. I pushed aside the dry, dead thistle, and I saw it. The soil was dark, not just damp, but muddy. A patch of bright green, clover-like grass, no bigger than my hand, was thriving in the hidden moisture. That's before our valve, I said, my pulse quickening. That's before the old meter, he said. He dug the shovel into the soft, wet earth, sank in easily. He dug again. A third time. There was a sickening wet slurp. He had hit the pipe, and water, dirty and brown, began to seep into the hole. It's on their side, I said, pulling out my phone. It's been leaking for years, he said, his voice grim. They've been charging your grandfather for water that was feeding weeds. I didn't call the board. I didn't yell. I took 27 high-resolution photographs from every conceivable angle. I filmed a 3-minute video clearly showing the location of the leak relative to the county road and the property line. I attached the metadata stamped files to a new email. I wrote to the Mesa Verde Water District Board pursuant to our meeting this morning and in advance of your team's arrival. My foreman, Efrain Cortez, and I have identified a significant active leak in the district's main feed line located at these GPS coordinates. See attached file. This leak is approximately 400 yards prior to the Blue Mesa property meter. We have documented this systemic failure and request an immediate audit of account 451B's historical billing, as it appears the district has been charging this property for water that never reached its meter. I sent it 2 hours later. 2 trucks from the water district arrived. One was the meter installer. The other was a supervisor. I said nothing. I just pointed to the hole Efrain had dug. The supervisor, a man with a clipboard and a panicked look in his eyes, looked at the leak, looked at his map, and started swearing. I got a call from Mrs. Agnew's office an hour after that. Whitford. In light of the systemic issue, your foreman discovered the board has voted to amend your agreement. We are waiving the entirety of the penalty and late fee portion of the outstanding balance, effective immediately. Your past due balance is now $6,200. We will credit your $5,000 payment. Your new balance is $1,200. I expect that in writing, I said. You'll have it by 5 p.m., she said. Her voice was clipped. Thank you. I hung up. I walked back to Efrain. He was cleaning the grease from the rebuilt pump. I told him. He just nodded. Good. Gio, he said. The wind just blew some of the dust away. Now the work starts. That afternoon, I drove to the county clerk's office. I filed the paperwork. I paid the $150 fee. I was no longer Calla Whitford, private citizen. I was Calla Whitford, sole managing member of Blue Mesa Botanica LLC. My name was on the shield. My phone, the one with the cracked screen, became my operations center. I went on a vendor site. I placed an order for 5,000 high-neck 100 ml amber glass bottles. I ordered 5,000 paraffin-coated cork stoppers. I paid for it from my personal account. The number in that account was now terrifyingly low. I sat in my car in the library parking lot using their free Wi-Fi. I opened a free design program. I uploaded a scan of my grandfather's 1959 brass stamp. I chose a clean, modern sans serif font. I typed the words Blue Mesa Botanica and beneath it, I typed the line that would be my promise, wind-run distillation. At the bottom, I left a blank space. Batch number. I called the manager of the Canyon Row Farmers Market. This is Calla Whitford from Blue Mesa Botanica. I spoke to you last week. I have my LLC filing. I have my water contract. I'd like to reserve my booth for the 1st of next month. I paid the deposit. Another hit to the account. My last stop was a computer recycling center on the edge of town. I bought a used square model point-of-sale terminal. It was yellowed plastic and looked like it was from 2005. It cost $90. This thing doesn't take chip cards. The man said. I know. I said. I took it back to the shed. I sat on the floor and using my phone's weak signal as a hotspot, I downloaded the open source firmware update, plugged it in, booted it into safe mode, and spent 2 hours forcing the old dying machine to learn the new language of modern payment. It finally grudgingly accepted the update. I opened my new merchant account. I linked it. I swiped my own credit card. A $1 test charge. A moment later, my phone buzzed. The charge was approved. The sun was long gone. The shed was pitch black, lit only by the faint green glow of the PUS screen and the blue light of my phone. It was almost midnight. And then I heard it. It started as a groan deep in the earth, a shudder in the pipes. Then came a hiss, air being forced out of the lines. It was followed by a thump 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 as the water hit the newly rebuilt pump. I stood up. I walked to the main spigot on the distillery wall and I turned the heavy iron handle. Air sputtered out, coughing white mist into the dark. And then it came. Water. It wasn't a gush. It was a steady, clean, powerful stream splashing onto the dusty concrete floor. It wasn't just water. It was a sound. It was the sound of the pipes, the copper lines, the pump. All vibrating. All working. It was the sound of the entire system coming alive. A low, resonant hum. It was the sound of brass and copper singing. I stood there in the dark, my hands in my pockets, just listening to the pipes. I didn't cry. I just listened to the music. The sky was the color of a fresh bruise, a deep bruised purple that was just beginning to lighten to gray at the eastern horizon. The air was cold, sharp, and so still it felt like the world was holding its breath. There was a single perfect star hanging over the Maya. The only sound was the crunch of our boots on the gravel path. Ephraim stopped at the edge of the first row of silver dawn. The plants were no longer the gray skeletons I had first seen. Our careful metered watering had revived them. They were still tough, still hardened, but they were alive. And a faint purple haze of blossoms had erupted from the silvery green foliage. He bent down, his dark fingers gently touching a blossom. It was covered in a fine, perfect layer of moisture. Fog, he said. Dew. He looked up at me. The first hint of light was catching the silver in his hair. Now, he said. Now you cut when the dew is still on the bud. The morning cool holds the oil in the blossom. When the sun hits it, he snapped his fingers. The oil is gone. Ben Matt. The sun burns it off. The wind takes it. You cut now. The oil will be heavy. He handed me a sickle. The blade was curved like a crescent moon, and he had sharpened it himself. It was wickedly sharp, the metal gleaming in the gray light. I had practiced on the dry dead stalks. This was the first time I would cut a living valuable thing. Don't saw, he instructed. His voice. A low rumble. One motion. Grab the bundle at the base. One smooth upward cut like this. He demonstrated. His hand gnarled and strong, gathered a thick bunch of stems. The sickle flashed, a silver arc in the dim light. Thunk. The sound was clean, satisfying. He held up a perfect bundle. Not a single blossom disturbed. Don't cut to the wood. You'll kill the plant for next year. Just the green. I took my place at the next plant. I grabbed the stems. The dew was cold and wet on my palm. I positioned the blade. I pulled. My cut was hesitant. It snagged. The stems tore. I'd failed. Again, he said. His voice flat. No judgment. Just an order. I took a breath. I let the cold air fill my lungs. I focused on the sound his blade had made. Shoo. Thunk. I grabbed the next bunch. I set the blade. I pulled hard and fast in one single smooth crescent motion. Thunk. The bundle came free in my hand. It was perfect. We worked. We didn't talk. The only sound was the rhythmic thunk of our sickles, the brush of stems against our canvas aprons, and the sound of our breathing in the cold. The sun climbed and the sky turned from purple to a pale aching blue. We worked with a focused urgent rhythm. A race against the sun. My back began to ache. My palm stung where the sickle handle rubbed. But I didn't slow down. I just fell into the rhythm. Grab. Set. Chunk. Grab. Set. Thunk. With every cut, the air exploded with scent. It wasn't the soft, sleepy smell of lavender I'd known. This was raw. Powerful. It was the smell of the plant's green blood. Sharp. Herbal. And intensely camperaceous, mixed with the earthy smell of the damp soil in the cold, mineral smell of the morning dew. When the sun finally crested the mesa, flooding the field with light, we were finished. Rows and rows of cut lavender lay on the ground. We moved just as quickly, gathering the bundles, tying them with jute twine, and carrying them armloads at a time to the distillery. Inside the shed, we hung them. We hung them from the wooden rafters, row after row, until the entire ceiling was a forest of upside-down purple. The shed, which had smelled of metal and dust, was transformed. It now smelled like the very essence of the high desert. A green, powerful living scent. They will dry, Ephraim said, grabbing a bundle of the still living silver dawn. The blue links we dry for bundles. But this? He held the silver dawn. This we distill now while it's fresh. He filled the massive copper still, not with the hanging bundles, but with the fresh cut, decovered blossoms we had set aside, packing them down tight. He sealed the helmet, his movements precise, checking the gaskets, tightening the clamps. He lit the fire, not a wood fire, but a low, precise gas flame he could control. And then we waited. The still began to warm. The copper skin of the Olympic turned from a dull brown to a warm glowing rose gold. A low hum began to vibrate through the concrete floor. It was the sound of the water inside the jacket beginning to boil. The sound of steam being born. Listen, Ephraim said. I could hear it. A faint hissing. A gurgling. As the steam began to move, forced upward, penetrating the tightly packed blossoms, its heat bursting the tiny microscopic sacs of oil on the buds. The shed grew warm, humid, and the air became thick with a smell of hot, wet lavender. The steam, now carrying the oil, traveled up the copper swan's neck and into the condenser coil, where our cold, precious pump water was circulating. We stood at the output valve. Ephraim held a glass beaker. A single clear drop appeared at the end of the pipe, then another, then a thin, hesitant trickle. The 4 shots, Ephraim said, his voice low. He held the beaker, collecting the first liquid. This is the poison. The first steam. It's harsh. It's all the acids, the impurities. You throw this away. He swirled the liquid. It looked like water, but the smell was sharp, acidic, almost like vinegar. He let it run for a full 2 minutes. Then he swapped the beaker for a large glass Florentine flask. Now, he said, his voice dropping to a whisper, now we wait for the hearts. The trickle continued, but the liquid coming out was no longer perfectly clear. It was cloudy, milky. And the smell changed. The harsh acidic note was gone. What replaced it was overwhelming. My grandfather had described it in his book. It doesn't smell like a flower, he wrote. It smells like the whole world. It smells of the herb, the honey from the bee that touched it, and the hot stone it grew on. He was right. It was the richest, most complex scent I had ever experienced. It was the lavender. Yet, but beneath it was a note of sweet, dark honey, clean, herbal sharpness, and a dry mineral smell that was unmistakably the smell of the sun-baked mesa rock. It was the smell of the wind itself, distilled. We watched for an hour as the flask filled. The milky liquid slowly, magically began to separate. On the bottom was the floral water, the hydrosol, and floating on top a thin, precious, shimmering layer of the purest, palest gold, the oil. When it was done, Ephraim turned off the heat. He used a glass separator, his hand steady as a surgeon's to draw off that thin golden layer. He collected it in a small clean beaker. It wasn't much. From the entire still, hundreds of pounds of flowers, we had maybe 2 L of pure oil. Low yield, he said, holding the beaker up to the light. But look. The oil was heavy. It was viscous and the color was a deep pale gold. This, he said. A note of something I'd never heard in his voice. Bride. This is Wind Run. This is batch 01. We bottled it that afternoon. The small 100 ml amber bottles I had ordered. We filled them one by one in a small pot. I melted the sticks of deep purple wax. We dipped the ket top of each bottle into the wax, sealing it. And while the wax was still warm, I pressed my grandfather's brass stamp into it, the 1959 seal. We sat there, surrounded by the hanging forest of drying lavender, and looked at the table. Lined up in perfect rows were 84 bottles. Batch 01. Canyon Row. Farmer's market was chaos. It was loud. It was the smell of roasted chilies, kettle corn, fresh bread, and goat cheese. It was the sound of a bluegrass band, laughing children, and vendors shouting. Our booth was at the far end, past the vegetables, near the artisanal soap makers. It was nothing. A simple wooden table, the same one from the distillery, a canvas banner I'd had printed for $40, Blue Mesa Botanica, and on the table, a stack of the dried blue lynx bundles and 20 bottles of batch 01. I hand-lettered a small chalkboard sign. It didn't list prices, just said, "Listen to the wind. Smell the scent." People walked by, their arms full of tomatoes and corn. They glanced at us. Another farmer stalled and kept walking. Ephraim sat on a stool in the back, his arms crossed, watching. He said nothing. A woman pulled by her husband slowed down. "Oh, lavender," she said dismissively. "It all smells the same, does it?" I asked. I didn't offer her a bottle. I had a small open tester. I dipped a paper strip. I didn't wave it at her. I just held it out. She leaned in, skeptical. She inhaled. She stopped. Everything about her stopped. Her face, which had been hurried and stressed, went soft. Her eyes closed just for a second. "Oh," she said. It was a whisper. That's not what is that?" "That's Silver Dawn," I said. "It smells of honey and hot stone." She opened her eyes. She looked at me. "Really?" Looked at me. "I'll take 2, she said, already digging in her purse. And so it began. People didn't stop because of our sign. They stopped because they saw the look on the face of the person who was smelling the tester. It was a chain reaction. I saw my opportunity. I didn't sell. I just offered the experience. I saw their shoulders drop. I saw their eyes soften. I was selling them a memory. I was selling them a moment of peace. Late in the afternoon, a woman with a professional camera and a press pass approached. She was sharp, energetic. "Neva Torres." she said, holding out a hand. I write Mesa Harvest, the food in a blog. I have not seen this label before. Ever. We're new, I said. And we're very old. I gave her the paper strip. She didn't just smell it. She studied it. She inhaled. Then breathed out. Then inhaled again. Notes of camphor. She murmured. But no bite. Honey. And is that mineral like a river rock? We call it hot stone, I said. She looked at Efrain. You're a Fra Cortez. I thought you'd retired. I did. Efrain said. I unretired. Na's eyes lit up. She saw the story. Who are you? She asked me.
I'm Kale Whitford.
This was my grandfather's farm. She took pictures of the bottles, of the 1959 wax seal, of the chalkboard sign, of Efrain's hands, of my face. What is wind-run distillation? It's a promise, I said. It means we only distill what the wind tells us is ready. She nodded. Writing it down. I'm going to be in touch, she said. And she left. By 2 p.m. we were sold out. Every bottle. Every bundle. The old $90 POS machine had worked flawlessly. My cash box was full. On Monday, I sat in the shed. I opened my laptop. I logged into the Mesa Verde Water District portal. I paid the first installment on the old debt and I paid my first water bill in full on time. A few days later, Neve Torres's article went live. Essential oil from the Mesa wind. Elias Thorne's granddaughter and Efrain Cortez revived Blue Mesa. It was beautiful. It was respectful. It focused on the process, the heritage, the scent. My email, which I'd put on the new labels, started to ping and ping and ping. I needed help. I put a notice up at the community college's agricultural department, seeking part-time weekend help, farm market and distillery work. Must be able to lift 40 pounds. I interviewed 3 people. The first 2 wanted to be influencers and asked about the vibe. The third was Maya Boone. She was a student studying soil science. She showed up in work boots. She had questions about my irrigation methods. It's $18 an hour, I told her. Sitting across from her at the workbench. Weekends only. You'll be selling at the market and you'll be helping Efrain clean the still. It's hard work. It's dirty work. I'll give you a clear W-9 and a written contract. Your hours are your hours. I pay on time every time. When can I start? She asked. That night, Ephra and I sat in the distillery. The hanging lavender was dry now, rustling in the evening breeze that slipped through the tin walls. We were writing in my grandfather's book, the Mesa Wind Calendar. We weren't just recording the wind. We were adding what we'd learned. Efrain wrote in his own surprisingly elegant script. The silver dawn waited. It held its oil through the drought. It didn't fight the heat. It used it. I wrote beneath it. The market came to us. We didn't chase. We waited. We let the scent do the work. I capped the purple pen. It was a good day. It was a good week. I felt for the first time like I was breathing. My phone resting on the bench buzzed. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize, but I knew who it was from. Brent. It wasn't words. It was just a link. Clicked it. My stomach went cold. It was a video. A local morning show segment from a station in the city. The Chiron read. Local family's lavender legacy. And there was Savannah. She was standing in a field. Not my field, but a generic rental field holding a bottle of purple soapy-looking liquid. The label was a cheap glossy knockoff of mine. Blue Mesa Lavender Company. It's just so wonderful, she said. Her voice dripping with fake sincerity. To be reviving my family's heritage as the co-founder of Blue Mesa. I just want to bring my grandfather's dream to everyone. Co-founder. My family's heritage. My blood turned to ice. She was stealing my story. She was stealing my name. I felt the anger rise. Hot and acidic. Like the 4 shots. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall. Instead, I took a breath. I held it. I thought of the cold, clean cut of the sickle. I thought of the 10-day leash from the water company. I thought of the contract I had signed. I didn't reply to Brent. I didn't throw the phone. I pressed the volume button and the power button at the same time. The screen flashed. Screenshot saved. I saved the video file. I backed it up. And then I went back to the ledger. The video link from Brent was a stone dropped into the quiet pond of my progress. The ripples spread instantly. My inbox, which had been filling with hopeful inquiries and compliments from Neve Torres's article, changed. The tone shifted from curiosity to confusion. An email from a small boutique in TA. Hello. I saw your co-founder Savannah on Mesa Morning today. I'm a bit confused. Is your product the same as the one she was showing? Her bottle was purple? Another from a yoga studio that had placed a test order. We're not sure about the brand identity here. We saw a CEO on TV. But your invoice lists you as the sole proprietor. Can you clarify who is actually in charge? Then the first cancellation. The spa that had been so interested after the farmer's market. Hello, Kala. We are unfortunately canceling our pending order for 50 units. We are uncomfortable with the brand confusion and the discrepancy in messaging. We prefer to work with a single clear distributor. We will be contacting MS Mallory at the Lavender Co. address she provided. Financial damage. It wasn't theoretical. It was a number in my spreadsheet. A number that had just turned red. I watched the video again. This time with the sound off. I watched it like a predator. Analyzing prey. Savannah in a white linen dress. Laughing in a field of lavender. It wasn't my field. The plants were a different varietal. Fuller. A different shade of purple. It was stock footage. Or a field she had rented for an hour. She held up her bottle. It was a generic Boston Round. A cheap common bottle. The liquid inside was a deep artificial chemical purple. My oil was pale viscous gold. Her label was a flimsy glossy sticker. A near-perfect mimic of the font I had chosen. But the name was different. Blue Mesa Lavender Company. Co-founder. She'd called herself CEO. She'd used my grandfather's story. My story. And pasted her face on it. She was diluting the brand. She was polluting the market. She was, in legal terms, creating active and deliberate confusion. The final insult arrived 3 days later. A white courier van drove down my long, cracked road. A plume of dust behind it. The driver, looking annoyed and lost, handed me a single crisp white box. It wasn't from a supplier. It was heavy, made of expensive textured cardstock. I opened it. The scent hit me first. A cloying sweet synthetic lavender perfume. It was the smell of a cheap bathroom soap. Inside, packed in tissue, was a brick of business cards. Picked one up. The cardstock was thick. The letters embossed. Savannah Mallory. SB. Blue Mesa Lavender Company. And beneath it, an address. Brent's corporate office in the city. And a phone number. It wasn't a mistake. It was a message. It was a threat. I am the CEO. You are the dirt. Ephraim was in the shed cleaning the condenser coils. He saw the card in my hand. He saw the box. He saw my face. What is this? He asked. I handed him the card. He read it. His entire body tensed. The veins on his neck stood out. This is a lie. This is theft. His voice was hot. Hello? Angry engine. You must go to the TV station. You must call Torres. You must tell everyone she is a snake. You must fight. No, I said. My voice was quiet. It was cold. The anger was there. But it wasn't hot like his. It was a block of ice in my stomach. A public fight is what they want. It's messy. It makes us look unstable. It makes me look like the scorned stepdaughter. They win in the mud. We win on the facts. We win on the ground. He looked at me. Confused. What does that mean? A letter? She will laugh at a letter. She will. I agreed. Brent's lawyers will laugh. They'll send back a threatening, expensive letter of their own. The letter isn't for her. The letter is for the file. It's the first brick in the wall. It proves I acted in good faith to resolve the dispute. That afternoon, I went to the library. Not my shed. I needed the high-speed, reliable internet. I needed a printer. I sat at a public terminal. My first stop was not a lawyer's website. It was the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office database, the trademark electronic search system. I typed Blue Mesa Botanica into the search bar. There it was. My application filed the day I registered the LLC. Serial number, filing date, live awaiting examination. My name, my LLC tied to the name. I started a new search. Blue Mesa Lavender Company. My heart was pounding. The result came back. No test records were found. She hadn't even filed. It was a bluff. A fast, cheap, television-based lie. She was all marketing. No foundation. My second stop was my laptop. I didn't need an expensive lawyer to write the first letter. I knew how to write a business letter. I spent 6 years of my life writing them. I addressed it to Miss Savannah Mallery. At the address on her card. Via certified mail. Return receipt requested. Receipt and desist notification. Unfair and deceptive trade practices. Trademark infringement. And false advertising. I didn't make it emotional. I made it factual. A bulleted list of her violations. 1. Your false and misleading claims of being co-founder and CEO of a Blue Mesa entity which you made on Mesa morning on or about date. 2. Your deliberate use of the Blue Mesa name, which is confusingly similar to my legally registered and prior use trademark Blue Mesa Botanica LLC. 3. Your actions have caused demonstrable market confusion and direct financial damages to my business, as evidenced by customer communications and order cancellations. I didn't just make claims. I attached the proof. I was building my case. Attachment. A certificate of formation for Blue Mesa Botanica LLC. Attachment B. USPTO filing receipt for trademark Blue Mesa Botanica. Attachment C. Copy of the Mesa Verde Water District Service Contract in the name of Blue Mesa Botanica LLC for the property at address.
Attachment D.
High-resolution photographs of the Blue Mesa Distillery, copper stills, and the 1959 brass stamp, establishing historical precedent and physical possession. I concluded with the demand, you are hereby directed to immediately cease and desist all use of the Blue Mesa name in any form. You are to recall all products and destroy all marketing materials, including the business cards you sent to my place of business. You are to issue a public retraction on all media platforms you have used. I printed it. I printed the attachments. I put it in a large envelope. I drove to the post office. I paid the $15 for certified mail and a return receipt. It was a small satisfying legal click. The first shot was fired. When I returned, Ephraim was waiting. So, a letter. The letter is defense. I said. Now, offense. I pulled up the website for the Mesa Harvest Days Festival. It was the biggest, most prestigious agricultural event in the state. It wasn't a small farmer's market. It was the event. The press was there. The buyers from the big spas and hotels were there. And there was a panel of judges for Best New Product and Heritage Revival. This, I said, turning the laptop to him. This is our courtroom. This is where the judges are. This is where we show them what is real and what is a lie. He looked at the registration fees. They were high. This is a big risk. We'll need more than batch 01. I know, I said. I looked out the shed door at the fields. The wind was picking up. It was the hot, dry south wind my grandfather had written about. The wind from week 23. You said that wind was a war, that it stressed the plants. He looked at me, a slow understanding dawning on his face. You want to harvest now in the wind. She's selling a story about a calm, pretty field. I said. Well, sell the truth about the storm. Well, give them the scent of the fight. We harvested in the afternoon in the hot, driving wind. It was brutal. The stems whipped our faces. Dust filled our lungs. We harvested a fraction of what we normally would. The plants were stressed, their flowers tight, angry little buds. We distilled it that evening. The yield was tiny. From a full still, we got less than a liter. But the oil? It was different. It wasn't just honey and hot stone. It was electric. It was sharp. It smelled of ozone, of the hot metallic dust of the mesa, of the pure, dry, violent power of the wind itself. It was impossible to fake. This, I said, holding the small glass beaker of dark, potent gold. This is the windstorm reserve. We bottled it in tiny 10 milliliters amber vials. We sealed them with black wax, not purple. We stamped them with the 1959 seal. 50 bottles. That was it. It wasn't a product. It was a statement. The next 2 weeks were a blur of preparation. I spent the money. I rented a premium booth space at the festival right by the main entrance. We didn't just bring bottles. We brought the process. Ephraim found a small 10L copper test still. A perfect gleaming miniature of our large ones. We would run a demonstration. A slow, cold, steep distillation of dried herbs, just so people could smell the steam, see the copper, see us. I designed and printed a large professional banner on heavy canvas, not vinyl. Blue Mesa Botanica LLC. And beneath it, I created a large mounted chart. The wind run process. It was our affidavit. Step 1. Hand harvest. A photo of my gloved hands holding the sickle. Step 2. Copric distillation. A technical diagram of our stills. Step 3. Oil hydrol separation. A photo of the golden oil floating on the water. Step 4. Wax-sealed bread. A close-up of the 1959 stamp in purple wax. We weren't selling a product. We were selling authenticity. We were selling the work. And the final piece. A small clear acrylic plaque. Professionally engraved. I placed it on the front table right under our main sign. It was quiet. But it was loud. Blue Mesa Botanica LLC. Independently owned and operated by Calla Whitford. Not affiliated with Blue Mesa Lavender Koi or any other entity. It was not an accusation. It was a legal fact. It was a boundary line drawn in the sand. The day before the festival, I sent out my press release. I sent it to every media outlet on the Harvest Days press list. I sent it to Neve Torres. The title Blue Mesa Botanica to unveil Windstorm Reserve. A limited batch distillation at Mesa Harvest Days. The release didn't mention Savannah. It didn't mention co-founders or family. It was cold, hard data. It mentioned Ephraim Cortez by name as master distiller trained in Provence. It mentioned the 1950s-era copper Olympic stills. It mentioned our Mesa Verde Water District Conservation Certification. It was a wall of verifiable facts, all of which belonged to me. I prepared my final piece of armor. A simple black binder. Inside, in clear plastic sleeves, the sign notarized inheritance buyout contract. I'd driven to the bank and paid the final installment, every cent just to have the document stamped, Paid in full. The LLC registration certificate. The Water District contract. The USPTO trademark filing receipt. The printed email cancellations showing financial damages. The green and white certified mail receipt for the CD letter signed for by Brent's receptionist. It was my war file. I wouldn't show it unless I was attacked. But I was ready. That night, the booth was set. The mini still was gleaming. The bottles were lined up. Ephraim was polishing the copper. I stood back looking at our work. It looked solid. It looked real. It smelled like lavender and copper. She will come, Ephraim said. He wasn't asking. I know, I said. What will you say? When the press asks you about the other one I had been practicing. I needed an answer that wasn't a denial. A denial is weak. I needed an answer that was a truth. I looked at our sign. I looked at the process chart. I looked at the bottles of real golden oil. I practiced it out loud. My voice quiet in the enormous empty festival tent. We listen to the wind first. Then we sell the scent. The morning of the festival was a controlled explosion. The gates opened at 8. And a river of people, a torrent of noise and color, flooded the fairgrounds. The air was a thick soup of smells: kettle corn, roasting chilies, barbecue smoke, livestock. It was a chaotic assault on the senses, and in the middle of it, our booth was an island of calm. We were positioned exactly as I'd planned, near the main entrance, a hydraulic artery. People were drawn in, not by shouting, but by curiosity. The first thing they saw was the gleaming miniature copper still. Ephraim had a low flame under it, and a slow, mesmerizing drip of clear hydrosol was falling from the condenser arm into a glass flask. Tink, tink, tink. The sound was a hypnotic counterpoint to the festival's roar. It was real. It was happening right in front of them. A local news camera roaming the grounds lingered on our booth for a full minute. The lens zooming in on the copper on the slow patient drip on the forest of dried lavender hanging from our rafters. We were already on the air. Neve Torres arrived an hour in, phone in hand, already live streaming to her blog's followers. Okay, everyone. I'm here at Mesa Harvest Days and I found the real thing, she said, her voice bright and conspiratorial. She turned the camera on the mini still. Listen, she whispered into her phone's microphone. That's the sound of the hydrosol separating. Tink, tink, tink. That's the sound of authenticity. She captured the intent faces of the people leaning in, inhaling from the paper strips I was offering. She was telling our story for us in real time. Around 11 o'clock, the judges arrived. 3 of them. A woman with sharp, intelligent eyes who owned a chain of boutique hotels, a man who was a renowned perfumer from Santa Fe, and a professor of agricultural history from the state university. They moved with an air of professional boredom. They'd seen every gimmick. I didn't give them a sales pitch. I said nothing. I simply took one of the black wax-sealed vials of Windstorm Reserve, uncorked it, and dipped 3 fresh paper strips. I handed one to each of them. The hotel owner smelled it first. She paused. That's not just lavender. The perfumer closed his eyes. He inhaled deeply, holding the strip to his nose for a long time. There's ozone in this, he murmured, almost to himself. Petra and something else. Something ancient. Resinous. He opened his eyes and looked at me. His professional boredom completely gone. Replaced by sharp, focused interest. This smells like a memory. How did you do this? Before I could answer, the history professor pointed a thumb at Ephraim. I know you. You're a Fra Cortez. Elias Thorne's man. I heard you packed it in. I did. Ephraim said. His voice a low gravel. The wind changed its mind. The judges exchanged a look. They understood. This wasn't a product. This was a resurrection. They thanked me. took one of the tiny vials for their official deliberation, and moved on, leaving a palpable current of interest in their wake. And then I saw her. Savannah cut through the crowd like a shark's fin through water. She was flanked by Brent, who looked angry and out of place in his expensive city slick suit. Savannah was a vision in white linen. Her hair perfect. Her smile a predatory slash of red lipstick. She was performing. She ignored me completely, her eyes fixed on the spot where the judges had just been, scanning for the cameras that followed them. She strode up to the edge of our booth just as a small crowd drawn by the judges' interest was gathering. She put her hand out, a gesture of magnanimous ownership meant for the audience. "We're just so thrilled," she began, her voice loud, projective. "Practice to be here sharing our families. Excuse me, Mom." The voice was quiet but firm. It was one of the festival organizers, a woman with a clipboard and a no-nonsense expression. She had seen Savannah's approach. She had seen our sign. "We have a registered vendor for this booth," the woman said, her eyes on Savannah. "Blue Mesa Botanica, LLC. We need to clarify any claims of partnership for the festival's liability." Savannah's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. The interruption was not part of the script. "Thor," she said, recovering smoothly. "I'm the co-founder. This is our family business." The organizer looked at me. The crowd was silent, watching. This was better than the pie-eating contest. This was drama. I didn't answer Savannah. I didn't look at her. I looked at the organizer. "One moment," I said. I reached under the table and brought out the black binder. My war file. I opened it. My movements calm, deliberate. I didn't present a jumble of papers. I laid out 2 documents on the smooth, worn wood of the table. The first was the inheritance buyout contract. I put my finger on the final page on the 3 signatures: Brent's, Lorraine's, Sava's. Then I moved my finger to the large red official bank stamp across the bottom. Paid in full. The second was the Mesa Verde Water District Service contract. I pointed to the account holder name, Blue Mesa Botanica LLC, and the service address, the farm. The paper was the truth. It was cold and it was hard. The crowd leaned in to see. I saw the flash of a phone camera, then another. The local news camera, which had been filming a segment on prize-winning pumpkins, swung around, its red light blinking. It was on me. This was my moment. I looked directly into the lens. I didn't raise my voice. I let the microphone do the work. "We listened to the wind first," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Then we sell the scent." The camera operator, a true professional, zoomed in. He zoomed past my face, focusing on the table. The lens captured the bold red "paid in full." It lingered on my grandfather's signature on the old contract, then panned to the 1959 wax seal on a bottle of batch 01. He was connecting the dots. He was telling the whole story in 3 seconds of video. A man in the crowd, emboldened, asked the question out loud. "Hey, are you the same brand I saw on TV the other morning?" I didn't answer him with words. I simply lifted my hand and pointed. I pointed to the small, elegant, engraved acrylic sign that had been sitting there all day. The sign that had become a loaded gun, independently owned and operated by Calla Whitford, not affiliated with Blue Mesa Lavender Company. A murmur went through the crowd. They understood. The lie was exposed, not by shouting, but by a sign. Brent's face was a mask of thunder. He took a step forward. "Now you listen here," he started, his voice a low growl. But he stopped. A large uniformed security guard who had been watching the whole exchange had quietly moved to stand at the corner of our booth. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, his arms crossed. He was a period at the end of a sentence. The confrontation was over. A few minutes later, the festival organizer with the clipboard returned. She was smiling in her hand. She held a large blue ribbon with gold lettering. She reached up and pinned it to the canvas awning of our booth. "Congratulations," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "The judges have awarded Blue Mesa Botanica the 2025 Heritage Revival Prize." The applause was sudden, and it sounded like dry waves washing over the shore. In the middle of the clapping, two people slipped quietly through the crowd. It was the woman from the hotel chain and the perfumer from Santa Fe. They didn't come to congratulate me. They came to do business. The woman pressed her card into my hand. A note was scribbled on the back. "Order for all 12 pin-in locations. Call me Monday." The perfumer did the same. "Hi Lech Spa. We want an exclusive on the Windstorm Reserve. Let's talk numbers." They slid back into the crowd as quietly as they had come. I looked over at Savannah. She was backing away slowly. She had put on a pair of large dark sunglasses, a shield against the stares of the crowd, but she couldn't hide the tight white line of her mouth. The festival wind, the real Mesa wind, picked up, whipping a strand of her perfect blonde hair across her face, obscuring her retreat. She turned and was swallowed by the crowd. We sold out of everything an hour later. That evening, the festival grounds were quiet. The crowds were gone. The only sounds were our own footsteps, the rustle of us packing our empty boxes. Maya was sweeping the booth. Ephraim was carefully wrapping the miniature still in a blanket. I sat on a stool at the table, the blue ribbon hanging from the rafter above me. I opened my grandfather's book, the Mesa Wind Calendar. I uncapped the purple pen. I turned to a fresh page and under today's date I wrote one single line. The wind won big. The victory at the Harvest Festival was a single clean shot. The war that followed was a grinding daily siege. June arrived like a fist. The sky sealed itself. A sheet of white metallic heat. The radio crackling in the shed announced the countywide emergency. A Stage 3 drought. The email from the Mesa Verde Water District was cold and immediate. Our water quota was cut 25%. Effective now. The 32% I had saved with the new drip lines was no longer a buffer. It was a deficit. "We can't keep the fields alive with this," I said to Ephraim, staring at the number on the screen. It was an execution order. "You're thinking like a farmer," he said, his voice rough. He was sitting on a stool sharpening the sickles. "You have to think like the plant. The lavender doesn't want a long, comfortable drink. It wants a shock. It wants to be reminded of the knife." He was right. I spent the next 2 days in the field, not with a shovel, but with a micro drill and tubing. I converted the system. I tore out the simple emitters. I programmed the pump's timer. We weren't doing drip irrigation anymore. We were doing pull strip. It was brutal. We gave the plants nothing for 2 days. The soil cracked. The leaves silvered and curled. Then for exactly 10 minutes, I'd hit the pump. A short violent pulse of water. Just enough to shock the root ball, to tell it to live. Then nothing again for 48 hours. We were forcing them to fight. I couldn't trust the app on my phone. I couldn't trust my eyes. I had to trust the soil itself. I built my own tensometers, simple analog tools, a ceramic tip buried in the earth, a water fill tube, and a vacuum gauge. I didn't care how moist the soil was. I cared how hard the plant's roots were pulling. I was measuring their thirst. When the gauge hit 60 cents, I pulsed the water. Not before. It was a high-wire act with no net. The dried bundles. Ephraim said one afternoon, looking at the forest of blue links hanging from the rafters. "We are wasting this. It's our second best seller," I said. "We are selling the plant," he said. "We should be selling the memory of the plant." He picked up a dried, brittle bundle. Smelled good. But it was a quiet, dusty scent. "Heat will destroy this." The still is too violent for it. He went to the supply cabinet. He pulled out a large 1-gallon glass mason jar, a jug of organic sunflower oil, and a handful of the dried lavender. Cold steep, he said. The old way before copper before fire. He crushed the dried lavender, put it in the jar, and filled it with the oil. He sealed it. Now we put this in the sun for 3 weeks. The sun is our still. The oil is our condenser. I didn't wait 3 weeks. I set up a pilot program. 10 jars, each with a different ratio, a different varietal. I labeled them. I was running a lab. It was a new product, a new line. A way to create value from something that was already dead. My competition, meanwhile, was self-destructing. The first online reviews for Savannah's Blue Mesa Lavender Company began to appear. They were not just bad. They were catastrophic. 1 star. Do not buy. This is not the lavender from the Harvest Festival. This smells like a truck stop bathroom. I opened the bottle and my head immediately started to hurt. This is cheap synthetic perfume. A total lie. Another 1 star. I'm reporting this to the festival board. They're using the Blue Mesa name to sell this purple chemical trash. I have Kala's real oil. This is an insult. I think I'm allergic to it. Savannah had made a critical mistake. She had mimicked my name, but she couldn't mimic my oil. She had sold a lie to a customer base I had already educated in the truth. The market was punishing her faster and more efficiently than any lawyer could. But my own success was a new kind of prison. The pinion in order. The one from the festival was ready. 1,000 bottles boxed and labeled. I called the freight company. The quote they gave me was 30% higher than the one I'd based my invoice on. It's the fuel surcharges, lady, the dispatcher said. His voice bored. Drought means fuel costs more. Everything costs more. You want the truck or not? I did the math. At that price, my profit margin on the biggest sale of my life was almost 0. I'd be working for free. I spent the next 6 hours on the phone. I didn't call freight dispatchers. I called logistics managers. I called warehouses. Called other farms. I found a produce distributor. One that shipped cold storage trucks full of organic lettuce from the coast 300 m away. What happens to your trucks when they're empty? I asked the manager. What do you mean? He said. Your trucks drive here full. They must drive back empty. That's a backhole. An empty refrigerated truck burning diesel all the way back to the coast. There was a pause. He knew what I was. What's your proposal? Whitford. I don't need refrigeration, I said. I just need space. I have 10 pallets ready to go. They're non-perishable. I'll pay you 70% of the standard freight rate in cash, if your empty truck can pick them up on its way home. You turn an empty losing run into a profitable one. I save my business. He agreed. I'd save not 18% but 30%. I turned their inefficiency into my weapon. Then the sky turned red. It wasn't a storm. It was a wall. A wall of dust from the Utah plains moving at 60 m an hour. The radio called it a haboo. It hit the farm not with a boom, but with a suffocating, abrasive hiss. The world went dark. The air filled with fine choking powder that tasted like clay. I was in the shed. I heard the sound I dreaded most. The pump. It was running our pulse drip cycle. It was fighting the wind. I heard the low, steady hum. And then I heard it change. The hum became a high, desperate whine. Then a clack, clack, clack. Then a sickening final groan. Then silence. The silence was absolute. The dust storm was raging. But the heart of the farm had stopped. The pump was dead. My fields had 300 gall of water in their lines, and I had no way to move it. They would be dead by morning. I ran out into the storm. I couldn't see. I had to feel my way along the guide rope I'd strung to the pump house. I forced the door open. My headlamp cut through the swirling, choking red dust. The pump was hot. The motor casing was burning to the touch. I knew that sound. The motor had seized, but the power was still trying to turn it. The capacitor. The small cylindrical part that gives the motor the kick to start. It had fried itself, trying to fight the dust. No one was open. No mechanic could get here. I was alone. But I wasn't helpless. I'd rebuilt the pump. I knew its bones. I got in my truck. I drove blind 10 miles to a place I'd scouted weeks ago. The industrial boneyard. A field of dead, rusting industrial equipment. HVAC units from dead strip malls. Broken down coolers. Old swamp fans. I climbed the fence. I spent an hour in the red, howling darkness. My knuckles bleeding. Tearing apart old air conditioning units with a wrench. I was hunting. I looked at the labels on the capacitors. 40 microfarads. 30 microfarads. I needed a 50 at 370 volts. I found it in the belly of a giant dead commercial fan. I drove back. I sat in the red swirling dust of the pump house. I discharged the old melted capacitor. I spliced the wires of the new one. My hands shaking from the adrenaline. Not the wind. I sealed the connections with electrical tape. I stood back. I flipped the breaker. There was a click, a hiss, and then whump. The motor kicked. The low, steady, beautiful hum returned. The water was moving. The farm was alive. I sat on the floor of the pump house, my back against the vibrating wall, and I just listened. The victory was total, and it was private. That night, the dust settled. The ordeal had given me a new idea. I looked at my power bill. I looked at the pump. I looked at the still. I was paying a fortune to fight the heat of the day. I called the power company. I'd like to switch my business account. I said to the off-peak time of use plan. The rates were 60% cheaper. From 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Our lives changed. The farm became nocturnal. Maya, who I'd hired full-time, would arrive at sunset. We'd load the still, start the fire, and begin the distillation. As the moon rose, the shed glowing with warm work lights became a beacon in the dark. Silent fields. The copper gleamed. The scent of hot lavender filled the cool night air. Ephraim's role changed. Too. He developed a cough. A dry hacking sound that wouldn't leave the dust. He said, "Don't worry. Gala. Esponomamas. It's just dust." I worried. I watched him. He was tired. Ephraim. I told him, "Your job is no longer to lift. Your job is to teach. You are the master distiller. Maya and I are your hands. You just point and talk." He started to argue, but the cough took him. He sat down on his stool. He nodded, his pride wearing with his exhaustion. He agreed. We were surviving. We were winning. Nev Torres sent me an email. It was a link to a high-end trade journal, Artisanal Distillation Quarterly. They had reviewed our windstorm reserve. They called the wind-to-run process a revolutionary return to terroir-based scent profiling. Whitford is not just making oil. She is bottling the climate of the mesa. I was changing the scent map and I made one final move. Not for the business, but for the land. I spent a week with a lawyer from a land trust. I filed for an agricultural conservation easement. It was a dense legal document, but its function was simple and it was permanent. I was selling the development rights of Blue Mesa for a small one-time payment. The land was now legally and forever protected. Could never be a golf course. It could never be a subdevelopment of Brentwood condos. Could never be anything but a farm. I had locked it. I had saved it from the very idea of a man like Brent. 2 days after the filing became public record, my phone rang. It was him. His voice was a slick synthetic honey. Kala. Honey. I've been thinking about you. I heard about this terrible drought. It must be so hard. I'm well. I'm worried about you. I said nothing. I just listened to the lie. I've been talking to Lorraine and we just want to help. He continued. I'm in a position to buy a small part of the farm. You know. Just a few acres. The part by the road. Maybe just to give you a cash infusion to help you out. He was probing. He thought I was weak. He thought I was broke. He thought he could carve off a piece of my land, my victory, and sell it to a developer. I let the silence sit. Brent, I said. My voice calm, flat. Hold on. I'm sending you an email. I hit send. The subject line was Re your offer. The body was a single blue clickable link. The link to the county's public database showing the permanent conservation easement. He was quiet. I heard him click. I heard him read. It's a beautiful thought. Brent. I said. My voice is cold and clean as the cold. Steep oil. But as you can see from the public record, the land's development rights have been permanently extinguished. It has no speculative value. Can only be a farm. So, unfortunately, I can't sell you a part. I heard a sound from his end. A sharp intake of breath. A muffled curse. He had understood. Checkmate. He hung up. I walked out of the shed. Into the hot, bright light of the late afternoon. The drought was still on. The fields were stressed. I looked at my grandfather's journal. It was week 23. The week of the south wind. I waited. I stood at the edge of the field, my hands in my pockets, and I waited. And then it came. It wasn't a breeze. It was a presence. A shift in the air. The hot, fast, dry wind from the south. It hit the fields. And the silvery, stressed out plants, the survivors, began to move. They rustled. They danced. They fought. I closed my eyes. I didn't need the gauge. I could smell it. Plants, in their panic, were releasing their oil. The air was filling with that sharp ozonic electric scent, the smell of the windstorm reserve. It was the smell of an old debt about to be paid in full in a wave of fighting purple. The first domino fell silently in a place I couldn't see. It was an obscure press release from a Bias cosmetics conglomerate, a company called Aura Bloom. It announced they were recalling their Desert Botanicals product line due to inconsistent ingredient sourcing. Neve Torres forwarded it to me without comment. I did the research. Aura Bloom was the parent company of the cosmetics chain that had been Savannah's big score. Their Desert Botanicals line was the one featuring her cheap synthetic purple liquid. An entire product line pulled from shelves across 3 states. The financial impact would be a bloodbath. The second domino was an email. It landed in my inbox a week later on a Tuesday night. The sender was Savannah Mollery. The subject line was simply family. My finger hovered over the delete button. Curiosity cold and sharp made me click. Kala. It began the tone a thick cloying syrup of fake sincerity. I know we've had our differences and I truly regret how things have been. But in times of trouble, family has to come together. We're facing a temporary supply chain challenge, a little hiccup. And I was thinking of you. I was thinking of Grandpa's legacy. I believe we can help each other as family should. It was the most disingenuous paragraph I had ever read. But it wasn't the text that mattered. It was the attachment. Term sheet. Blue Mesa Partnership PDF. I opened it. It was a formal 2-page document. A proposal from Mollery Ridge Ventures for a 24-month exclusive supply contract for all of Blue Mesa Botanica's essential oil output. And then I saw the price. She was offering to buy my oil, my windstorm reserve, my sweat and sleepless nights for $40 a liter. The wholesale price I was getting from the Pinion Inn was $200. She wasn't offering a partnership. She was offering an insult. She was offering a price that would bankrupt me but would allow her to keep her own head above water. She was trying to turn my farm into her personal low-cost subsidiary. Even in her desperation, her first instinct was to dominate, to consume. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. The term sheet told me everything I needed to know. They were drowning. Instead of hitting reply, I opened a new browser tab. I went to the Mesa County Public Records portal. I didn't search for Mallory Ridge Ventures. I searched for the address on Savannah's business card, the one for their corporate office. I cross-referenced it with commercial water accounts. It took me 20 minutes of digging through dry bureaucratic databases. And then I found it. A secondary account. Not for the office, but for a small adjacent warehouse unit, a blending and bottling facility. And attached to that account was a bright red flag. A public notice of violation from the Mesa Verde Water District. Delinquent payments. 3 months overdue. They were so cash poor from the Aura Bloom recall that they couldn't even pay the water bill for the warehouse where they were mixing their cheap synthetic perfume. They didn't just need my oil. They needed it to generate immediate cash flow to save a contract and pay their own bills. I now knew their exact point of pain. I had found the lever. The phone rang 2 days later. It was Brent. His voice was unrecognizable. The booming, arrogant baritone was gone. It was replaced by something soft, something broken. Kella. It's Brent. I know, I said. There was a long awkward silence. I could hear his shallow breathing.
Kala honey.
He began the word honey sounding foreign and disgusting in his mouth. Songai Bodingi daughter. Your stepfather is sorry. The lie was so profound, so complete. It almost had its own gravitational pull. We messed up. He stammered. Savannah was ambitious. I was a fool. We are in trouble. Hella. Real trouble. He took a shaky breath. We have a contract. A big one. Desert Thistle Spas. It's our last lifeline. They require 100% pure unadulterated lavender oil. Their labs test everything. We can't. We can't fake it. We need you. Cubant. Save us. His plea hung in the air, thick and desperate. He was begging just as he had predicted I would. I will have a meeting, I said. My voice flat, devoid of any emotion. Here at the distillery tomorrow, noon. Yet, of course, anywhere you want. Efrain Cortez will be present as a witness, continued, cutting him off. And Lorraine and Savannah must be here as well. All principals. Is that understood? Yet, he said. His voice small. We'll be there. I hung up. The next day at 11:55 a.m., I sat at the heavy wooden workbench in the distillery. The air smelled of drying lavender and clean copper. Efrain sat on a stool in the corner, his arms crossed, his face a mask of stone. He was not a participant. He was a presence. Silent. Unimpeachable witness. In the center of the table, I placed my phone. Screen up. I tapped the screen. The red icon of a voice recorder app began to glow. The timer starting its slow, silent count. They arrived at noon precisely. They didn't drive up in the Escalade. They came in Lorraine's Lexus, a smaller, less ostentatious sign of their diminished state. They stepped into the shed and stopped, blinking in the dim light. This was my world. The hanging herbs, the gleaming copper, the scent of real work. They were intruders here, and they knew it. Brent looked thinner, his expensive suit hanging slightly loose. Savannah was pale under her makeup, her sunglasses failing to hide the dark circles under her eyes. Lorraine, as always, was perfectly composed, But her hand was clamped on her pearl necklace, a gesture I now recognized, not as poise, but as terror. Sit, I said, gesturing to 3 metal folding chairs I had set up on the other side of the workbench. They sat. Felt like an interrogation. I let them sit in silence for a full minute. The only sound the soft ticking of the recorder's timer on the screen. I received your term sheet, I said. My eyes on Savannah. It was illuminating. Savannah flinched. And I received your phone call, I said, turning to Brent, which was also illuminating. I slid a single piece of paper across the table. It was a contract. My contract. Here are my terms, I said. They are not negotiable. I let them read it. I watched their faces. First, I said, my voice cutting through the silence, my words precise and legal. You will sign and publicly publish on all your social media channels and your company website a formal letter of apology. I slid a second piece of paper over the letter. I had already written it for them. This letter will state unequivocally that Savannah Mallory is not and has never been a co-founder of any Blue Mesa entity. It will state that her claims on television were materially false and created misleading market confusion. It will state that Blue Mesa Botanica LLC is my sole and exclusive property. Savannah's face went white. This wasn't just business. This was public humiliation. Second, continued, you will destroy all marketing materials, physical and digital, bearing the Blue Mesa Lavender Coupa's name that includes the business cards you so thoughtfully sent me. Third, I will agree to supply you with 200 L of Silver Dawn essential oil. This is a one-time non-exclusive agreement. You have no rights to my future production. Brent looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. He saw the oil. He saw the Desert Thistle contract. Fourth, I said, crushing that hope. Payment is 100% upfront wire transfer. The funds must be cleared in my account before a single bottle leaves this distillery. We don't have that kind of capital on hand. Brent stammered. Then I suggest you talk to your bank, I said coldly. That is your problem, not mine. Fifth, you are contractually forbidden from naming Blue Mesa Botanica as your supplier. You may list 100% pure high Mesa lavender oil on your ingredients list. My name, my company's name, will not be associated with yours. My brand will not be tainted by your recovery. And finally, I said, leaning forward slightly, the breach clause. Paragraph 6. I tapped the paper. Should you violate any term of this agreement if you fail to publish the apology, if you imply an exclusive partnership, if you use my name, the contract is immediately terminated, and you will be liable for a penalty payment equal to 3 times the total value of this shipment. The penalty is due within 10 business days. I leaned back. I had built a perfect cage of words. Every term was a direct, logical consequence of their actions. Savannah stared at the pages, her mouth slightly open. Brent's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles twitching in his cheek. Lorraine stared down at her pearls, her knuckles white. Kala, Lorraine said, her voice a thin, ready whisper. This is so harsh. Can't you soften it a little for family? Binya. For the sake of family. The words hung in the air. The final desperate plea. The last card they had to play. I looked at her. I looked at all of them. The 3 people who had stood and seen sure of my failure. So eager to profit from it. I let the silence stretch. I looked at Brent. You once gave me some advice, I said, my voice quiet, but carrying to every corner of the shed at the will reading. Do you remember what you told me to do? He stared at me, his eyes blank with confusion. You told me to beg. I said. You told me. Beg us later. And maybe then there'll be time. Do you remember that? The color drained from his face. He remembered. I picked up the pen from the workbench. I placed it on the contract directly in front of him. Well, I said. It's later. Savannah made a small choking sound. Brent squeezed his eyes shut for a second. Lorraine was perfectly still. He picked up the pen. His hand was shaking. He signed his name. He pushed the contract to Savannah. She signed her signature, a spidery panic scrawl. Then Lorraine. Her elegant loop was shaky, broken. The sound of the pen scratching on the paper was loud in the silent distillery. It was the sound of surrender. It was the sound of a debt being paid. It was the sound of a lock clicking shut. The day of the transfer was a perfectly orchestrated piece of theater. It began not at my farm, but at an independent laboratory in the city, a Groot Labs. A technician in a white coat, a man with no emotional stake in my story, met their courier. He took a sample from the large stainless steel drum containing the 200 L of Silver Dawn oil. My oil. The oil they had paid for with a wire transfer that had, after a tense 48-hour hold, finally cleared. I was there. Brent was there. We stood on opposite sides of the sterile lab, watching through a glass window as the technician prepared the sample. He injected it into a gas chromatograph. We waited. The machine hummed, then spat out a long, thin strip of paper covered in peaks and valleys. The technician studied it, made a few notes, and then printed the official certificate. He came out and handed a copy to each of us. 100% pure Lev Angela and Gustafoglia, he said. His voice flat. No synthetic markers. No carrier oils.
No adulterants.
Purity is 100%. The product is exactly as specified. Brent took the certificate. His face grim. It was his proof for desert thistle spas. For me, it was my shield. It was the legal, scientific, unimpeachable truth. The second act of the play was theirs. At 2 p.m., Mallory Ridge Ventures held a press conference in a small, stuffy conference room at a mid-range airport hotel. I watched it on my phone via a live stream link Neve Torres had sent me. Brent and Savannah stood at a lectern, a cheap vinyl Mallory Ridge banner behind them. They looked exhausted, but they were trying to project an air of triumph. Today marks a new beginning, Brent announced, his voice straining to find its old booming confidence. Mallory Ridge Ventures is proud to announce a bold new strategic partnership that will revolutionize our desert botanicals line, ensuring our commitment to authentic, locally sourced ingredients. Savannah stepped up, a brittle smile plastered on her face. Thanks to this new collaboration, she said, carefully avoiding the word exclusive, we are guaranteeing our customers, like the prestigious Desert Thistle Spas, the highest quality product on the market. They were walking the tightrope of the contract. They were lying with the truth. The moment the live stream ended, I initiated the third act. Mine. At 4:01 p.m., I hit send on a pre-drafted email. It went to Neve Torres, to the entire Mesa Harvest Days press list, and to the procurement managers at Pinion Inn and High Ledge Spa. The subject line was clinical. For immediate release clarification regarding Blue Mesa Botanica LLC. The body of the email was simple. In response to recent market confusion, Blue Mesa Botanica LLC wishes to clarify its operational status. We are an independent family-owned entity and are not engaged in any exclusive partnerships. For full transparency, please see the attached public statement from Mallory Ridge Ventures and its CEO, Savannah Mallory. The attachment was a high-resolution color scan of the letter, the apology with their 3 wet ink signatures at the bottom. The effect was instantaneous. Na's phone was ringing before I had even closed my laptop. 5 minutes later, a new post went live on her Mesa Harvest blog. The headline was a cannon shot. Exclusive Mallory Ridge admits to materially false claims in signed apology. Blue Mesa Botanica confirms independence. The article didn't just report, it eviscerated. Neve laid out the entire timeline, the TV appearance, The Harvest Festival confrontation. The new partnership. And now the signed confession. She posted the letter itself for the entire world to see. The spa and hotel buyers were not fools. They read the article. They understood they had been lied to. That Mallory Ridge had tried to use them as leverage in a family dispute. Their loyalty was to the product, not the middleman. My phone rang. It was the buyer for Pinion Inn, then High Ledge Spa. They placed new, larger orders direct. My phone rang again. This time it was Brent. The professional mask was gone. He was screaming. What have you done? You're destroying us. The spas are backing out. They're calling me a liar. You are a liar, I said. My voice as calm as a frozen lake. You just put it in writing. It's the contract. He choked out. You have to help us. Just let us say we're your official distributor. Just a little white lie. At least let us say exclusive partner. Brent, I said, cutting him off. I refer you to your contract. Paragraph 4.2. Prohibition of exclusivity claims. The words have a price. You agreed to it. You can't do this to us. I'm not doing anything, I said. I'm just holding you to the terms you signed. And I hung up. They made their final fatal mistake that evening. Desperate. They went on a local business news channel. A last-ditch effort to control the narrative. The host, who had clearly read Na's article, was sharp. Mr. Mallory, he asked, can you clarify the nature of this new partnership? There are reports that your supplier, Blue Mesa Botanica, is denying any exclusive arrangement. Brent froze. He was a terrible liar under pressure. He looked to Savannah. She jumped in. Her voice high and strained. It's a very close relationship. We have an exclusive partnership with a heritage farm that allows us. And there it was. The word. The one word forbidden by the contract she had signed. Exclusive. I was watching. I was recording. The moment the word left her lips, I saved the clip. I opened my laptop. I drafted the email to Brent Mallory, Savannah Mallory, Lorraine Mallory, CC Mallory Ridge Ventures Legal Counsel. Subject notice of immediate termination. Demand for penalty payment. Pursuant to paragraph 6 of our legally binding and executed supply agreement dated date. This email serves as formal notification that you are in material breach of contract. Specifically Section 4.2 Prohibition of exclusivity claims as evidenced by Ms. Savannah Mallory's public statement on show name at approximately 7:15 p.m. this evening. Video clip attached for your reference. As per the terms you agreed to, the supply agreement is hereby terminated, effective immediately. Furthermore, the penalty clause is now engaged. Please find attached invoice 1003 for the full penalty amount equal to 3 times the value of the original shipment. Payment is due within 10 business days. I attached the invoice. I hit send. The final trap had been sprung. An hour later, I heard a car skid to a stop on the gravel outside the distillery. The door was thrown open. It was Savannah. She was unrecognizable. Her perfect makeup was strewn with tears. Her hair was a mess. She wasn't a CEO. She was a terrified girl. Hella, she gasped, stumbling into the shed. Please. You got the email. You can't do this. Desert Thistle just called. They're invoking the purity clause. They're canceling the entire contract if we can't secure a long-term supply. They're going to sue us into the ground. I didn't turn to face her. I was standing at the workbench, a low flame warming a pot of deep purple wax. The rich clean scent of silver dawn filled the air, warm and sharp. I was sealing the new larger order for the Pinion Inn. Please. She sobbed. She was actually crying. Just tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you'll still supply us. We just need one more shipment. Please save the spa contract. Just one more lot. I picked up a freshly filled bottle, the golden oil gleaming inside. I dipped the ket top into the hot wax, coating it in a perfect glossy purple seal. My movements were slow, deliberate. I turned around, the bottle in my hand. The warm wax was beginning to set. You stood in Kincaid's office, I said, my voice quiet. But it cut through her sobs like a razor. You and Brent and my mother. You laughed. You told me to beg. I picked up the heavy 1959 brass stamp. I pressed it firmly into the warm wax on the bottle I was holding. It left a perfect deep impression. The seal of my grandfather. The seal of my victory, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. Now it's your turn. I set the finished bottle down with the others. A small, perfect army destined for the Pinyon Inn. I walked to the table where the contract lay. Beside it, I placed the printed copy of the termination notice, the invoice. I picked up my grandfather's stamp again, but this time I pressed it onto a black ink pad. I raised it like a judge's gavel, and I brought it down hard on the invoice right next to the word penalty, which was printed in large, bold letters. Thump. The sound was final. It was absolute. It was the sound of a hammer striking an anvil. Savannah stopped crying. She just stared, her breath coming in ragged, broken hitches. Brent appeared in the doorway behind her, his face ashen. His eyes locked on the bold black stamp on the invoice, on the word penalty. He was silent. He had no more words. I walked to the heavy rolling door of the distillery. I didn't look back at them. I pulled the door closed. The last thing I saw was their two silhouettes frozen in the warm golden light of the shed. Two ghosts at the scene of their own execution. The heavy door groaned shut. The sound of finality, locking them in with their failure. I stood outside on the porch under the vast star-filled desert sky. The cool night wind moved through the fields, carrying the scent of lavender out from the shed. It wasn't the smell of a flower anymore. It wasn't the smell of memory. It was the smell of freedom. It was the smell of a debt, finally and completely paid in full.